I just want to share a little bit today, a message that God's put on my heart about mercy and about grace, and especially within churches. You know, I come from a pretty harsh background. If you've heard my testimony before, I grew up in Los Angeles in the 80s. I grew up in a broken home. My mother actually tried to find an abortion. That didn't happen. I was born with a disease called spinal meningitis. I was actually pronounced clinically dead as an infant. I went through a lot of problems, a lot of abuse throughout my life. And I became a drug addict. I was a meth addict. I used to snort and smoke lines of crystal meth. And in 1987, I went to a Grateful Dead Bob Dylan concert. And there was a doctor in a hospital because I had overdosed, and they had to take me in an ambulance to this hospital because I had overdosed. And this doctor came in and talked to me, and I thought, oh gosh, I'm just going to get preached at. He's going to tell me I'm going to burn in hell. He's going to tell me how evil I am and all this stuff. But all this doctor did was share how much God loved me and how much value I had. And that has stuck with me for so many years. It was a week after that I ended up giving my life to Christ. And, you know, over the years, please applaud for that. A week after that, I went to see a Christian punk rock band called The Crucified, and they sang a song called The Silent Scream about abortion. And that started to pique my interest about the pro-life movement. So I started getting involved in pro-life. And when I got involved, I had a big mohawk, and I looked crazier than I do now, a lot crazier. And I remember people like were kind of freaked out when I would show up. I showed up at the March for Life in 1994, my first March for Life. And it was mostly pro-life grandmas and grandpas. It was mostly grandmas and grandpas. And we love our pro-life grandmas and grandpas, right? But I wanted to see more youth. And so my friend Jerry Horn took me to meet Nellie Gray, the founder of the March for Life. And when Nellie saw me, she looked at me and she's like, Jerry, are you okay? And he's like, no, this is my friend Bryan. He's pro-life. And she looked at me and she's looked at everything and she's like, all right, you could hang out with us, but Bryan, can you not wear that nail polish? That's freaking me out. And I'm like, all right, Nellie. So I never wore nail polish again to the March for Life in honor of Nellie. So, but she showed me some grace. She showed me mercy when nobody else. People used to think I'd show up at pro-life events, and they're like, he's one of the other side. Oh, no, we got to be careful about this guy. And I'm like, no, I'm pro-life, I promise you. And I started coming to the March for years and years. And then I started to see the shift at the March for Life from 70 or 80% pro-life grandmas and grandpas to 70% young people. And it was exciting to see that. And, you know, I was single back then when I first started coming, and then I ended up getting married, and I started having kids, and I'd take my kids to pro-life events, and I'd take my kids to all these things, and I'd teach them all this stuff. You know, and I was so excited when my kids would get involved in pro-life and go out and give talks in schools. They would write papers and such. And, you know, I looked at the way sometimes that we react to people that maybe aren't living the best lives. You know, I think that a lot of Christians are really good if we see a homeless man in the street to show him some grace and some mercy. Give them some food. If we see somebody hurting, a drug addict, all of that, we're so good at that. But you know, sometimes people that are already in the church fall down. People that are already have come to know the Lord, if they fall down, they stumble. And sometimes we're not so gracious with them. Sometimes we don't have that same mercy for people that stumble in our own churches, in our own places, in our own friends. And it's sad sometimes because I really believe I have spent so many years standing outside abortion mills, praying and sidewalk counseling and offering hope and alternatives and different for these young girls that are coming in. I've spent so many years, and I've met so many people that tell me, "Well, I'm a Christian and my dad's a pastor, and if he finds out, he'll kill me, and I have to abort this child because I can't disappoint my father." I've met pastors that have taken their daughters into the abortion mill because they said, if my church finds out that my daughter had sex outside of marriage, I can't be the pastor anymore, so I'm desperate. And they'll take their daughter in to kill their own grandchild because they're so worried about the judgment from their churches. They're so worried about not being shown that grace and that mercy. It always broke my heart, especially when I'd see these young people that don't want to do this, but they're so worried about their parents being disappointed. They're so worried. And I've talked to so many young people about that. It's something that's weighed on my heart. And about 5 months ago, it hit me hard. So I went into the hallway, and my 19-year-old daughter was crying, laying down, and she looked up and she said, Dad, I'm pregnant. And she said, Dad, are you mad at me? And I said, no. And I just grabbed her and gave her the biggest hug in the world. And I said, I love you so much. She's like, but aren't you ashamed of me? And I said, no. Being pregnant is not a sin. Being pregnant is not a disease. It is a blessing from God. And I love you. And I just hugged her and I just held her. I never in a million years thought I would be the one whose daughter is in that crisis pregnancy situation. And a couple days later, I took her to our local crisis pregnancy center. And when I walked in the door, they're like, hey, Bryan, thinking I was bringing, somebody from outside in the abortion mill. And they realized I brought in my daughter. And as she went inside, they came out and they hugged me. And they loved me. And I was worried. I thought I was going to get judged. Because I see that so much. I see that so much. There are so many times that we'll be so gracious to the homeless man or the drug addict. But I find sometimes that Christians sometimes like to kick their own wounded. And that's so wrong. One of my favorite Sundays every year is Divine Mercy Sunday. When we're reminded of that divine mercy that Christ shows us. I was the most evil person you would have ever met in your life. And Jesus washed it all away. And every time I go into confession and I open my heart up to God, He washes it all away. I could commit the same sin 30 times in a year. And if I truly go in there and I just open my heart to God, He washes it away. So when my daughter looked at me, I just said, baby, I love you. And on May 14th, see, I talked about when I first came and there was all those pro-life grandmas and grandpas. Now I'm a pro-life grandpa. I'm a pro-life grandpa. I am, Listen, I know most of you are young people. You don't have kids yet. You don't have to face that. But guess what? You have friends. You have friends in your schools. How many of you go to a Catholic or Christian school? Good. You know that if a young lady at your school ended up pregnant, how scared she would be that everybody would find out? How scared she would be that she'd get kicked out of school. Her parents would kick her out. So what my plea to you guys is, listen, if you find out about that young pregnant girl in your school, grab her, hug her, and love her, and show her the mercy that she deserves. Because if you don't, if she feels ashamed, if she feels unloved, if she feels shunned, chances are she's going to end up at the abortion mill. But we must do a better job of showing that mercy and that grace that Christ has showed us. I love my daughter so much. I have zero shame. She has made me a grandpa. How awesome is that? And I think I'm a pretty cool looking grandpa. I mean, But I want to plead with you guys. Remember that cursing. Because think about this. None of us are above reproach. None of us are without. Imagine this. We might judge other people, but imagine this. Think about this right now. What if I told you that for the next 5 minutes, everybody in this room could know every thought in your head and in your heart? How fast would you run out of this room? Yeah, I would. Grace and mercy. Grace and mercy. All right.